Good morning. I'm Ron Young with the Association of Lifelong Learners and welcome you to the Madeline Briggs Center for another presentation by our association. This presentation is entitled Why the Sky Might Not Be Falling and is presented by Brad Jensen from the Huron Pines organization. Will talk to us about how community-based conservation might make this a better place for us all to live. I became associated with the Huron Pines organization during my work for the Alpena County Road Commission. In that work environment, we had responsibility for roads and bridges and a variety of things, but the road stream crossings was the area that we came associated with Huron Pines. Those tended to be for us, sometimes maintenance headaches, sometimes a safety concern, but often not high priority with the general public. You would drive across those every day and maybe not give them a second thought. Environmentalists would look at that same site and recognize it as a source of pollution to the stream from runoff from the roadway carrying salt and eroding the banks. The naturalist would look at that same crossing and see it as a restriction to fish migration and other aquatic critters, if you will. So oftentimes, although we had concerns about them, they defied economical correction. They were often expensive to fix and affected a very small portion of our roadway. So they often got pushed aside for other pressing projects that the public was more concerned about. The Huron Pines came to us sometimes with solutions for these sites that brought a number of partners together and made it possible to correct a problem that was a thorn in our side. One example of that would be Sucker Creek Road over the Black River in Haines Township. This was a road stream crossing that consisted of a couple of very large culverts that would wash out occasionally when we had a major storm, dump a lot of sediment into the stream. We would hurriedly put them back together to get the traffic going again, and kind of a temporary fix that we hope to get to at some point, but never seemed to come about. Huron Pines approached us with a proposal from the Forest Service, the Great Lakes Initiative, and other organizations that suggested that we replace that structure with a timber bridge that would increase the hydraulic capacity, increase the safety of the roadway, limit the runoff from the road into the stream, and just had a variety of benefits. More importantly, they came to us with some money to address those problems. So we did that. We replaced the culverts with a bridge, opened up the stream to fish passage, provided guardrails on the roadway, paved the roadway to limit the runoff, and proceeded accordingly. So we ended up with what I call a win-win situation for everybody. We reduced our maintenance costs. There were safety improvements for the traveling public. Fish migration was extended. In this case, I think another 30 some miles upstream that fish could migrate for food, for spawning, for what fish like to do. So with that, I want to present to you Brad Jensen with the Huron Pines organization. And Brad, would you fill us in on your latest projects? Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for the introduction, Ron. We might have to have you actually work for Huron Pines to do some promotion for us. That was great, and you were a great partner to work with at the Alpena County Road Commission. So today I want to talk about why the sky might not be falling. And I've been thinking a lot about this title lately, quite a lot actually. When I talk to environmental friends or supporters, a lot of times they'll be so down about the globe, about the world and environmental problems. And I'm not here to do a scared straight presentation for you today, but the fact is there are some pretty significant threats facing all of us, from increasing storm intensity to loss of wildlife habitat to invasive species and water pollution. You've seen all those headlines. So when we talk about environmental issues, we've got that group to deal with where they think, boy, we're already past the point of being able to fix things. And then sometimes there's another group too that I talk with, and they tend to be more optimistic, but almost to the point of thinking, well, the earth will take care of itself. It's very resilient, or maybe they have faith in technology or something else, and we'll be able to solve these problems in the future. And you get these kind of two camps, and we see that in society with different issues nowadays too, but you get sort of the for it or against it position. And nobody's against the environment, of course, but when it comes to solving real problems, it takes everyone working together. And a lot of our work at Huron Pines, as Ron described, is really trying to bring together people with different viewpoints to do good conservation projects. And I want to share a few examples with you today about that. I will just say, what I'm probably not in either of those camps. I would say maybe cautiously optimistic about the future. And what I've seen in Northeast Michigan and in the communities and with the partners that we work is a lot of really good progress and a lot of good things happening. So I think with that, we'll switch the slides here and go to the next slide. So one more. Okay, there we go. So this is a good spot to start. This is our AmeriCorps team from this year. AmeriCorps is a program that we run at Huron Pines. We are in year 16 of that program. And these young people, typically fresh out of college, sign up for a year of service. We place them in different communities and with different conservation partners, but they give a year of their lives. They don't get rich doing it, that's for sure. But they have a great experience and are able to make a meaningful difference and help propel and help initiate conservation projects. So it's been a neat program for us. I think this year we've now had 330 people come through the program. So these are young people that you see out and about in Alpena. You've had a lot of good AmeriCorps members here, but all of Northern Michigan really. And this was a few weeks ago, a little bit warmer than today. And we were doing an AmeriCorps celebration on this day. It was to sort of hear about their achievements from the past year, have some fun, get to know everyone a little bit better. This was out at our Hubbard Lake Preserve. And I know the Alpena lifelong learners have been out there for different tours and have enjoyed the property. On this day though, after the group photo, for some fun, we decided to do a scavenger hunt. We broke into teams with the AmeriCorps members, and they went and I went with a team, and it was to identify some different things out in nature on the preserve. And I'll tell you, we started going, and I think they're so competitive, they started running through the preserve. And at some point I'm running too, because I'm with my team, right? And we're up and down the hills. If you've been to the Hubbard Lake Preserve, there's a lot of up and down. And I did what any old executive director would do. I immediately stopped while running, abandoned my team, pretended to look at something important on my phone while I caught my breath for a few minutes, and then rejoined them. I instantly thought, a couple of things. There's a lot of hills here at the preserve. These are highly energetic AmeriCorps members, and I'm not cut out to be an AmeriCorps member. But I love the program, and it's been good to us at Huron Pines. It's been good to Northern Michigan, and we look forward to continuing that for many years. But you see what the young folks are doing and the partners they're working with and how motivated and knowledgeable they are. And when I think about the future, one of the things that helps me be cautiously optimistic are the people that we're seeing coming out of college and their dedication to the natural world. And I don't think that always makes the headlines when we talk about younger generations, but it's been my experience that we've got a lot to be optimistic about, and there's some great people. So we'll advance the slide, and then just thinking about the impact that they help us have. This is a planet that we all share. We're right here in the heart of the Great Lakes Basin, and there's a lot of threats, but there's a lot of opportunities to protect water quality and improve habitat. And I always try to think about this photo. It sort of grounds me wherever we're working, because any one project that we're doing is part of a much bigger effort to conserve the environment, and we can't do it alone. It's definitely a team game here, where it takes anyone and everyone to help out. So for today, I want to talk about our work in 3 different areas. That's work to improve water quality and protect waters, protect land, so our Protected Places program, and then vibrant communities. And for us, the community piece is really important, because any one conservation project we do is all for naught if we're not able to sustain the effort. And that means for us, it's involving people and keeping good conservation work and resource management going, whether that partner is the Scouts or a road commission or a church or a business. It doesn't matter. It really does take everyone. Our vision at Huron Pines is literally conservation driven by engaged and empowered communities. So I think we're a little different than which people think of as a typical environmental group. That's not really how we describe ourselves, but we want to improve waters and protect land in order to help the quality of life in this area. So for today, what I'm going to do is run through a few example projects, and I'm just going to take a few counties. Like we are most active, in 12 counties of Northeast Michigan. I'm just going to pick 4 or 5 today and give you a few examples. The staff back at Huron Pines that actually work on these projects would probably shake their heads if they ever saw this, because I'm going through so quickly to describe it. So I realize there might be some follow-up questions. I'd be happy to talk afterward too, if you want to learn more about our work in any one community or on any one type of project. I think each of these could be like pretty long presentations on their own. So we'll start far to the south, though, as far south as we typically work, and that's Aranet County. One thing that struck me about Aranet County, we did a public meeting, like a town hall style meeting, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And a couple of people in Augrey, down in Aranet County, and a couple folks mentioned we were looking for input on possible future projects. And a couple of folks mentioned the Phragmites actually out at a place called Charity Island, Big Charity Island, which is a part of our National Wildlife Sanctuary. It's 10 miles out into Saginaw Bay. Mostly owned and managed through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They do a great job. Their priority is managing that refuge for wildlife. Hasn't always been able to get the attention that it deserves. And so the 2 gentlemen that mentioned this as a possible project, I thought in my head, I didn't say it out loud, but boy, this is going to be a real uphill battle. We've got a big problem, not the funding to solve it. And then it's very difficult to get out to, being an island out in the middle of Saginaw Bay. So with that in mind, though, we did convene a meeting of people we thought might be interested. And in addition to the normal resource partners like Michigan Sea Grant and the Nature Conservancy and Fish and Wildlife Service, we had a whole bunch of others show up. So the boat tour operator that does trips out to Charity Island came, the city manager came, the school superintendent came. You started to see lots of opportunity here with people who really cared about Charity Island. And so we started that work by taking young people, 4th graders actually, out to Charity Island for field trips. And what they would help us do is map the invasive plant. We handled the treatment of that, But there's a rare plant out there too called pitcher's thistle. And so they have helped over the years map that. And now 6 or 7 years later, we have data from all of these school classes that have been out there on a trip on the Charity Island boat. And that's probably that's a more interesting project field trip than I ever did all through school, even college, right? What a great opportunity to get these kids out to the island and learn a little bit more about what's special in their community, because this is really a special place. So from that experience with those students, we started working more with the school. We started working on the topic of stormwater runoff. And as you know, we're talking about stormwater being either meltwater or rainwater that goes across the pavement, impervious surface, and ends up in drains and then out into surface water. It's kind of an issue all over the place because water runs downhill, and we've built all of these communities right along water. But it's also a solvable problem. Our communities aren't so big. We're not talking about the city of Chicago or something here. We're talking about, in this case, the community of Au Gres. So helping people understand what that issue is, using students to help collect information and present that to like the city council is a great way to involve kids in real world ways to protect their environment. And that's sort of what we did here. We talked about the fact that storm events are increasing in intensity. This is for really high intensive storm events. This is what we see over about a 60-year period here. We've seen a pretty intense increase in the Great Lakes region. So stormwater is an issue and something we're thinking about in all of our communities. Go forward a slide. And what we did was a stormwater assessment then. So we could provide this to the city and say, these are the issues. Here's where we think we can help solve some problems. And by having the plan to maybe attract support to help that small community. Part of that process was really engaging the local community then. So besides the city council and the school district, having public meetings where people could come in, look at the maps and understand the issue. And then really being able to turn some stuff over to the school. In this case, they looked at the school property, looked at how runoff was affecting things, and then helped design stormwater rain gardens to capture and filter stormwater runoff. They really did all of the design work and the planning. And I will never forget the science teacher down there was on Twitter and would do updates about every day of what the class was doing. It was just amazing to me to see how involved they were and what they were accomplishing. If you look down on the bottom right picture, it's kind of hard to see, but behind the plants is a greenhouse. So not only did they collect all this information and start doing the rain garden design and planning, they also operated a greenhouse and they got that going so they could grow their own plants for restoration projects. If that isn't just like make you feel good about youth in conservation, it sure does for me, because that I was just blown away by this. Part of that stormwater work then is under an umbrella for us of a partnership we have with Huron Pines and our community foundation partners. For us, that is the Community Foundation for Northeast Michigan, based here in Alpena, and then also the Bay Area Community Foundation. We're working with some partners in Canada on sort of a whole Lake Huron, Let's Protect Lake Huron Forever program. And so there's the Grey Bruce Community Foundation just on that side of the lake that's been a good partner too. The idea though is to work with local communities to identify issues affecting Lake Huron, and then let's help support and implement practical projects to protect the lake forever. One of the, if we can just go back here, the one piece about that that's also important is when a community signs up to participate, we have a pledge that we want them to sign that is sort of a commitment to help protecting Lake Huron. We're hoping Au Gres is the first one to sign this. We hope we can get a sign up on US 23 there that they are Lake Huron Forever community. And my hope would be that you see every community along Lake Huron eventually adopt this and start to implement some good stormwater management projects and some other projects as well. So we'll jump north just a little bit to Iosco County. And one incredible area there that hopefully you've had a chance to visit is Tuttle Marsh. If you haven't, I can get you directions. Really neat bird area, especially if you're looking for osprey and that kind of thing. Again, a lot of invasive plants there, and it's a special habitat area. So on this project, we're working with our agency partners like the Fish and Wildlife Service to treat, and Forest Service to manage and treat invasives and really protect this, this is thousands of acres of land that's really important to Iosco County. So a little bit different than the school partnership, but an important one too. And then nearby on Lake Huron is what we call the Lake Huron Coastal Preserve. And I hope you've heard about this one. We've tried to make a lot of noise about it. Probably a year and a half ago, you're familiar with the US gypsum property, maybe the quarry down there. There's a lot of invasive species. They had been a partner with us for a number of years to address that problem. They had about a mile of shore, just under a mile of shoreline, on the other side of 23 that they had never used. And they were at a point where they felt like they could get rid of that, sell it off. You don't see that much undeveloped land too often on the Great Lakes anymore. You sure don't through Lake Huron. You don't see it for sale. And we knew that if they put it up for sale in 2020, that it was going to sell. If you remember the real estate market last year and even now, things had shot up about 25% really quickly. This was lakefront, pretty high value property. As we talked to them more and we talked to the township, which is Alabaster Township, we saw that there was interest in trying to protect this property and make it available for public use for generations to come. It's quite a ways from our office at Huron Pines, so we knew we weren't the best to hold it forever, but the township was interested. So we got to talking with them. Huron Pines took out a loan last year to buy the property. We did that just before Christmas in 2020. And that was to get it off the market. We knew if we could do it, if we could get it off the market, we could buy ourselves a year or two to raise the funding to protect the property. US Gypsum did a bargain sale for us, but still with buying the property and then putting together a fund for long-term management, this is about a $2.5 million project, which is a pretty big lift for us. We, about a year ago, then talked to 3 or 4 pretty significant donors. They came up with about $1 million, first $1 million for the project, which was really helpful. We did a local fundraising campaign and had about 200 people from the Iosco area donate to that this summer. We did some public meetings, and then for the rest of the project, we've applied for what's called the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. And if you're not familiar with the trust fund, you should know that it's probably one of the great things in Michigan that we really have going for us. Long ago, we decided as a state to take oil and gas revenue off of state land and invest that back into protecting land. So there's grants available to local government to protect land and also to do some park development. That park development and increasing the amount of lifting the cap on the fund, that was a vote that we had last year. You might remember overwhelmingly Michigan voters approved expanding that program. So that's a pretty neat thing. The trust fund's available for use. We've applied through Alabaster Township for $1.7 million for this project. That decision is going to be made December 1st down in Lansing at the trust fund board meeting. So I'd like to tell you today that it's great news, but the project is scored really high, but that's a lot of money we're talking about too. So I hope after the first that we can share some great news with all of Northern Michigan, because this is going to be a special site and a great project for years to come. If the funding doesn't get approved, we really have our work cut out for us for the next couple of years. It's tough. We've raised a lot already. It's going to be difficult to raise that much, but we'll work on it. It's a lot of bake sales to raise 1.7 million. This is an aerial photo of that property, so you can kind of see the green is the the property itself is outlined in red. The red going through the middle is US 23, and it's also the Iron Bell bike and walking trail that runs right through the property. So pretty good one to protect here, because we can create trails off of the bike trail that go right to the lake, and people can enjoy seeing Lake Huron and seeing the birds and everything else. There's a couple of trails we've just started to build. Those are in the blue on the south end of the property. But we're pretty excited, and Alabaster Township's been excellent to work with, really good partners. So more to come soon, but that's where we're at on this one. As we think about other land projects, though, we're trying to work across this Northeast region, which is like 4.5 million acres. You can't protect everything. But what we've tried to do is map different zones of the region and look at, based on data that we already have in aerial photos and some inventory work, kind of look at those maps and identify where the highest ecological value properties are. And we've mapped that like on 1 mile hexagons, and that's kind of what you're looking at on the map here. But we're showing between Alpena, north of Alpena, up through Presque toward Rogers City. And the greens represent areas that just have that a little bit higher natural value for the criteria that we're using. Doesn't mean all that can be protected or that everyone would want to protect those, but it's a good way to start a conversation and talk to a community about why and how, and talk to private landowners too. We get a lot of interest from people wanting to protect their land and do good things. So it's a good way to focus our effort. And then within those hexagons we were just looking at, these are photos from that area. We forget sometimes just how remarkable our land is up in this region, but there's some habitats that just aren't found elsewhere on the globe. And yeah, that needs care and stewardship. And that's what we're trying to do by working through different partners. So we'll jump into Alpena County. And Negwegan State Park, we kind of think of Negwegan and then going north, Rockport and Thompson's Harbor. Just the 3 state parks there are such special places and so much different than other state parks in Michigan. And so lately we've been working a lot with the DNR and with the friends groups for the different parks on how to improve the quality of habitat. And that's primarily right now, that's treating invasive species. So Negwegan got a lot of attention this past year. We've been mapping invasives the last couple of years, and then working with Friends of Negwegan to help with the work out there. But again, we're so fortunate to have such great state parks here, and they need a lot of attention. They need a lot of friends, right? They need a lot of resource management. These 4 photos are all from our Hubbard Lake Nature Preserve, the hills that I described earlier when I was getting all tired out. Part of the reason for our interest in owning this preserve is to get the community and to get the public out there and using it and enjoying it. It's a nice space because we've got a small house and a pole barn, and so we can use that for different activities and different student activities. The nearby school, Alpena Schools, has been a fabulous partner to work with through the years.
What time are you thinking?
And when we work with the school, we're not just working with the science class or an environmental class. It's how to engage all the different learning disciplines out on the property. So for example, our marketing staff has worked with their marketing class, their business class on some things. They've, as a real world experience, have produced some designs and some shirts that they've sold to help support the property. The industrial arts class has built the benches that are out on the property. The students come out and do hands-on science. For that, just the picture of the benches being used there and made. So pretty neat when you can involve all the different classes. In fact, as part of the work that we did with Alpena schools, they have a school forest on their own property. And it's just neat to see the kids get involved in all of the planning of that. So for example, the English class designed and led a survey of other students in the school about what they'd like to see as far as trails and use of the property. And so when you start to just bring in art and math and English and science and get people to see, yeah, all these things we can all work together to protect and improve the land. So jump into Montmorency County, kind of quick here. And Ron mentioned the road stream crossing work. This has a great group of fans that help support our work, but it's sometimes hard for people to understand. But what you're looking at right now is a map of the Thunder Bay watershed. And within the Thunder Bay system, there's probably over 700 of road stream crossings. They're not all problems, but a lot of times, especially where we have back roads that have just gotten more and more use over the years, and maybe the culvert was put in 50 or 75 years ago, and there wasn't enough money at the time to do it like we might today. Those sites can become problems for the reasons Ron described. The small culvert might be too small for the water to really pass through it, and so it shoots through it, right, at a high velocity, and that effectively keeps fish from moving through the culvert and moving upstream. So those dams where there's undersized culverts, actually, those road crossings where there's undersized culverts actually act as dams in the system. Dams that just don't allow for fish movement, which is troublesome because then you just lose that habitat. When you look at the Thunder Bay system, to the left would be the upper watershed, or the part that's kind of like upstream of Hillman. And that tends to be more cold water, in some cases cool water. Those projects, so think like trout water, right? Those projects are probably more important to us because the streams are so temperature sensitive. So a lot of times we'll look in that upper watershed and really try to focus on issues like temperature and sediment and fish passage. So this is a site, this is what it looked like earlier this year. This is Gilchrist Creek. And I think it's Greasy Creek Road that goes over it. So this is the before, and then this is the after. You can see that the culvert now has a lot more capacity. The stream actually looks like what it should look like going through. Ron described these as win-win projects, and he's absolutely right, because what we can bring, we can take that inventory and make the science case to funding agencies. And we can say, okay, we've inventoried all these sites, we've compared them all. Here are the biggest problems for these reasons, lay it out. And then funding from outside of this area through programs like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, those dollars can come into counties. And these are expensive projects. You know, this is maybe a $200,000 or $300,000 site when you get through all the equipment and labor and design engineering. So to be able to bring dollars into our local communities, have the road commission help support the work. They're usually good public relations projects too, because people can see the improvement. And the road commission typically participates by donating some labor and equipment that we don't have access to. So we've got the money to buy some of the supplies and do the engineering. They provide some local match, and everybody benefits, especially the stream. And the next road commission manager that doesn't have to deal with it as a problem, right, Ron? So this is same stream, not too far away, and another site that was a problem earlier this year. And then finished product looks like that. So where we can do a timber bridge like that, we're happy to do that. It fits the site real nice, and we've got a natural stream bottom, and that's what it should really look like. So it's when you think about 700 sites in a watershed, it seems overwhelming at first when you're doing the inventory, but you know, I've been at Huron Pines for 20 years now, and so you can start to see that list of problem sites get whittled right down. We've probably done 150 projects the last 10 years or so, and a lot of the top ones that were really big priorities. Jump a little closer to home here in Alpena. So Huron Pines opened an office in Alpena. We had been in Gaylord the last 12 years. We're still in Gaylord. That's where our little bit bigger office is. But we opened this one right before COVID started. So great timing, right? But we opened it because we wanted to be a part of the community, and that's happened. We were able to, you know, hire some local folks to be our staff here out of Alpena, and part of what drew us to the area, if you think about that vision that we have of conservation driven by engaged and empowered communities, we see that in Alpena. We see it with groups like yours, all the stuff the lifelong learners are doing, and Thunder Bay Audubon and NOAA, and a lot of partners that are located here. A great partner in the Community Foundation. And then the Besser Foundation really helped us to make the move and get things started. It's for us, it was a big step to open that office, but we're there now. So I always describe it as right next to the Take 5 Deli, because they have the best chocolate chip cookies in Alpena that I know of. Right downtown. Yep. Yeah. And then nearby, a project that we've been working on that most people know about now is the North Point project. This was really driven by the Nature Conservancy for a lot of years. They had a lot of money to raise in order to protect this project, but it's miles of undeveloped shoreline, you know, over 1,000 acres of land, and just some really, again, really rare habitats, coastal fen, things that you just don't see all that often. They approached us about holding what's called a conservation easement, permanent conservation easement on the property. The point of that, it really restricts the property from overuse or damage to the resource. So the plan is to transfer ownership of the property to Friends of the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and then Huron Pines will hold the conservation easement on the property, and we'll kind of jointly work that together for the foreseeable forever, really. That's what we've signed up for. So we're excited about it. There's a lot of logistical issues to still work out with a property like that. I get questions about like when will it be open? And so there's still some like access issues to work through. And whenever you have a new special place like this, you're really trying to protect the ecological values. You have to think about how much to open it up or how little to open it up. Because once you open the door, you can't really close it again. So it has to be a thoughtful process. And I know that takes time, but it'll end up being just a great resource and great place for the community. So I mentioned that Lake Huron Forever project earlier to you, and that's the partnership with Canada and with our community foundations. The picture in the upper right, that's one of our staff, Chris on the left, and then Patrick with the community foundation, and then Jeff Gray with the Thunder Bay Marine Sanctuary. They've both been partners on our Lake Huron Forever program. This first year of project work that we've been doing through that program, we were able to award a grant to expand the green roof on top of the NOAA building, and then secure some funding to do what we call permeable pavers in the parking lot, which allow for rainwater to infiltrate instead of running off. Kind of a couple of neat stormwater related projects that we hope to talk a lot more about soon. We're really excited about this Lake Huron Forever relationship that we have. And I should mention now, come June of next year, we're hoping to have.
I was just looking through Star Wars phonics books.
We're hoping to have a meeting in Alpena with the partners from Canada and folks involved in Lake Huron Forever. So
it's one of my Zoom things. I just silence it.
I think we can jump to Presque County here. So yeah, I've been excited about this one too. Hopefully you've made it out to the Emily Min Hunt Nature Preserve. I think the group had something going on out there. This has been a neat property for us, gifted to us by Thunder Bay Audubon. We wanted to do a little bit more in owning the property. We wanted to do a little bit more management and stewardship of it, and then also try to get folks out onto the property a bit more. It's 428 acres, so pretty significant chunk of land just north of Long Lake. And again, it's in, when you looked at that land map I showed earlier, this is sort of in that special area zone that we're kind of interested in. Last year we did the signage and parking lot and so forth. Afterwards, we ate apples out of the apple trees. Kind of not a great photo on the right, but it's rock. It's the limestone that's out there. And it's what's called an alavar. If you haven't heard of that, it's basically real thin soils on top of limestone, and the limestone's often exposed. So if you've ever had a chance to go to north end of Drummond Island, there's a place called Maxton Plains, which is probably the best example in the world of that type of habitat. But even on this property, we see it, you get to see it. So as you walk out to where that apple orchard is, you can see sort of the little piles of stones and then some bigger areas of exposed bedrock. And that's pretty unique for our in northern lower. We don't get to see that too much. It creates some interesting decisions though. Like there is an old apple orchard out there. It does produce apples still. I had a bunch last year. It's also growing on top of this really rare natural habitat. And then so you kind of have this cultural history and there's nothing wrong with that. And then you have this really unique habitat that could be restored a bit. So we're trying to kind of work through that as an organization, probably pull back on the orchard a little bit and try to manage more for what the habitat should be. So we had a contractor out there this year. We mowed down some of the non-native shrubbery and have started to do some restoration of the glade out there. I'm pretty excited about it, but this is one where, like a lot of things, there's not a clear yes or no or right or wrong answer. We're trying to think through and what's the right thing to do for the long term. So quite a lot that's been happening out there, and the property gets quite a bit of use considering where it's located. So just another really special place here in Presque County, and it's like you have an abundance of great things around Alpena. So as you go toward Rogers City, you have the Thompsons Harbor State Park. Our staff, our field team, we have a field crew that's based out of Alpena actually, spent a lot of time in Thompsons Harbor this year doing inventories and doing invasive plant treatment. They found some invasives like baby's breath that they hadn't seen before. They also found some rare plants that they hadn't seen before either. So kind of good and bad. We think of invasive species. This curve is, I think, instructive. It's the invasion curve. When you're way down to the bottom, the left, we can talk about prevention of things and not introducing new invasive species. As you move up that curve, there comes a point where it becomes almost fruitless to spend the money and effort to try to get rid of a certain type of invasive. So there's a point where it hits as you get from the yellow into the red, where the population is just, there's so much of it, it's not worth the time or effort. There's maybe some exceptions to that. We think about some properties, for example, like the Hubbard Lake Nature Preserve. We're trying to get rid of all invasive species on that property. And I think we can do it. But when you think about the whole region, that would be foolish. It'd be cost prohibitive. We don't have no one has the labor or money to do that. So you have to make choices about when, where, and what, and teach everyone to help be good stewards and recognize how to play a role and how to help.
How long
Yes.
does a species have to be around to be considered native?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you.
I mean, if you,
Yeah.
there used to be old chestnut trees.
Yeah.
Were they native?
So I don't have a good answer for you, but what I can say is we're trying to focus on non-native species that are also really invasive, right? So when they come to an area, they're so opportunistic, and the wildlife and other plants can't keep them under, the natural system can't keep it under control. So it's so invasive, it just takes off and spreads everywhere. If you can't get rid of those, you hope that it eventually, and it will eventually, given enough time, fall into a little more of a balance. That might be hundreds of years. It might not be on the timeline we want, but there is that. So you could argue that those apple trees are, those were non-native. Well, yeah, and we're also not really worried about them because they're not invasive, right? But we are when it comes to some of these plants that just take right off, and that's what we're seeing. And we're seeing that accelerate a little bit. So that's where I get nervous about invasive species, because our ability to move around the globe, just transportation, is so much better than it was 20 years ago. And there's so much more movement. Things come faster and faster. And that's what we try to keep an eye out for. We're in an interesting area here with some invasives, not all, but with a lot of them, because there's less people coming into this area, you kind of see the spread in other parts of Michigan in a lot of cases before you see it here. The exception to that would be the European frogbit that they've been working on out at the wildlife sanctuary. But with a lot of them, you can kind of look to southeast, like we did with Phragmites, you can look southeast Michigan and see that's coming, and then really have to make some choices about that. So if we use that plant as an example, because we were talking about it earlier, if it were up to me, there's maybe places in southern Michigan where if I was working there, we wouldn't probably treat that because there's just too much. And, it's been, eventually it'll have been there for a long time. And how much effort can you put into it? Up here, there's places where that's just starting to come out. And when you have like a Negwagon or Thompson's Harbor, you have an opportunity to control it. And I think you should, if the landowner and the local partners are interested in that, and there's some funding to do it. But it's a lot of work. So it's a lot of choices to make.
How do you eradicate it other than pulling it out?
Yeah, so there's never a good answer to this question either, right? When we talk about invasive species control, it's usually a choice between several bad options. With Phragmites, it's literally chemicals in the fall. It's putting chemicals on the stem, swiping the stem, and then that gets sucked down into the roots and kills it off. Yeah, well, there's a set of best management practices for how to apply those chemicals. So our staff has to go through training and get permitted and approved. It's not my favorite thing to do. It's just that the alternative to that becomes worse. We were talking earlier about a site where we did an assessment for Phragmites. The folks didn't want to do the treatment. And when we talk about chemicals, I get it. Like I don't get excited about that either. But then if fast forward a couple years and the spread is so much more that to get rid of it would be more chemicals, more cost, more time, and maybe not possible too. So yeah, but that's for that one. Every plant that we're talking about has a different. Some of it's hand pulling or cutting. It just really depends on the species. But the big thing is when you see something brand new in a place like Thompson's Harbor State Park, getting it out of there when it was just one plant. When you're to the left on that graph. And one of the ways to do that, because I don't think we can just use chemicals or have all the volunteers in the world pull everything, is training the right partners who are kind of the eyes and ears out there who can jump on stuff early. In this case, it's up in Rogers City. It's the Department of Public Works. They signed up for most day training, and I think we did 2 courses with them. So there's the in-classroom session and then out in the field. But it was about all of the different invasive plants that they might see, and then using them to eradicate those plants in some cases, or if they couldn't, reporting it. We have like an online reporting system for the region too that keeps track of that. But to me, this is where it's a community, right? It's got to be community partners that can take the lead on it. And if the commitment is there, if the city, like Rogers City, is willing to do it, the DPW can help do it. That's a good place to spend the energy. That's not true everywhere. And so we realize we can't win the fight everywhere, but hopefully in Rogers City we can. And then maybe the last project for today that I'll mention, this is up in the Vogler Recreation Area on the Trout River. So the dam is called Trout River Dam. And you can see it's pretty crumbly. People love this area. It's a recreational area that a lot of people hike around, and there's an impoundment, so some wildlife viewing and so forth. The dam also keeps lamprey from moving upstream. But that structure is not going to last forever, and we don't have an answer of this is what needs to happen, but we want to start talking with the community about what the options would be. So there's ways to, you can either rebuild the dam, you can get rid of the dam, or you can do something in the middle, and that might be the way to go in this case. There might be a structure that can be used that allows for different flow levels and will still block the lamprey. But that takes, again, a lot of planning, a lot of meetings, and a lot of folks to kind of talk with, because people love their natural resources. That's one thing we all have in common here in Northern Michigan, is we all love this stuff. And so you have really people who are really passionate about what should happen on all sides of the issue, and just working with them on what's technically feasible and also what the community wants, and figuring out how that can help the river at the same time. It'll be fun to work through that here in the next year. So I started off with that picture of AmeriCorps members, and I think I'll end with a picture of, this is our board and staff. We did a strategic planning meeting out at Heft State Park earlier this summer, and it's a great group of people. I would encourage any of you interested in protected places and healthy water and vibrant communities to talk with me about getting involved. We could use all the help we can get, whether that's input or support or participation in meetings and on committees. There's a lot going on, and we're an organization that does it with other partners. So we really count on people being out and about and being able to talk about some of these projects and help promote the idea of working together. I think that's when I talked about being optimistic about the future. The part that's the biggest struggle for us isn't invasive plants. It's not dams or road stream crossings. It's concern about people who have totally different viewpoints being able to come together for the common good and work together. And in my opinion, that's gotten a little more difficult in our American society here over the past couple of decades, but it's essential to having good quality of life in vibrant communities, and conservation projects are an important part of that. So I thank you all for listening, and I think I'll stop there.
Just say a quick thing.
Sure.
There's a wonderful book out right now called The Book of Hope, and it's by Jane Goodall.
Oh, great.
And so it's really, yeah, she does express hope for what we're going through. It's like an interview with a man that's written inspirational books. But I mean, I think she's a fabulous.
Yeah.
woman.
Did that one just come out? I haven't read. Okay.
Great Christmas gift.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yes, ma'am.
Besides the chemical and the hand pulling, is there anything else that you do to eradicate? Are those the only two options?
No, so it depends on the plant, right?
Okay.
So for example, 10 years or so ago, we started working with folks at Higgins Lake, and they were starting to just see a plant called Eurasian water milfoil, which starts growing before other aquatic plants do in the season. And so it can outcompete them and create some like mats of vegetation, not great for boating. And then if you chop it up, the fragments spread and it just grows more. So after mapping that, we proposed to them to try, maybe it's probably longer than 10 years ago, but we proposed trying like 5 different things and measuring which practice might work the best. And chemicals were a part of that. Weevils that eat the plant in that case, so like what we call biological control was a part of that. We used scuba divers to install like a geotextile mat on the bottom of the lake where plants were growing, and just basically shade out the plant. So that's 3. They started using scuba divers with like a suction thing to suction up the plant. Again, that wouldn't work in every lake, but this was just milfoil, so it was that was a possible option. I forget what the 5th one was, but they tried all of that, and some of it works better than others. Some of it costs more. Some of it's more labor intensive. They eventually went with the diver assisted suction program, and I think have had pretty good success with that. But I think it's the point of using that example is let's look at a problem, and if we don't have a solution, we can propose a few things and experiment a little bit. We can learn a lot from others too. I mean, that's important, but sometimes you can't. You have to experiment a little bit and see what's going to help in the long run. But
I have that narrow cattail in the ditch.
Hmm.
And I went out with a long handled pruner that I for looping willows. Well, it's very, very labor intensive and you're really not successful. Now, I have been told if you can cut down below the water, you might be able to drown it up, so to speak. But that
Yeah.
didn't all work that well. In some situations, but did cut back a little bit. So do you use chemicals on narrow leaf?
I would have to ask our staff on that. That's not a top. So the other thing they do here is lead so in this area, we have a coastal invasive species network that's made up of like a leadership team or steering committee, lots of different partners. That group identifies like the top several species that they think they can or need to work on. We talked earlier about some non-native species being maybe not as invasive or as harmful. And so those would be kind of lower tier things, but as a group, then they've prioritized that. And then we try to treat those species, knowing also that we can't get to everywhere. So a lot of times ditches get left behind because it's, you got a day to work on Thompson's Harbor or or a ditch, you know, and you're going to do Thompson's Harbor, but then the ditch is such a conveyance area for the spread of invasive species too. So I think that's where if we can do more of like those training workshops with the Department of Public Works, or in some cases we've worked with road commissions to help be the early eyes and see things. I'll never forget up in Presque County, we did a number of road stream sites on the Akiak River, on Silver Creek, which flows into the Akiak River. And the first time I ever saw Japanese knotweed was right there. The road commission actually flagged it for us. Tough plant, that plant, you know, can grow up through concrete and cause problems. So it was great that the road commission was a good partner in that case, and we could get on top of it before, you know, that was one that shot up as a high priority for us.
One of the things I noticed, Phragmites sort of helps the drug. You get into the quiet waters and, you know, like that. You have a few little bits of frog bits.
Yeah. And that's been a tough struggle here in Alpena. It's gotten more, it's gotten a lot of volunteer effort here. Some of your members, I think, have done a lot of the work. That one was a higher priority for us because at first you were only seeing it in Michigan in this area. We were like the first place. And then there were maybe 3 places. And I think you'll see it a lot more widespread the next couple of years, but it's gotten a lot more attention because this was sort of like the first spot people really started noticing, which is also good that you have that many eyes and ears out and about in this area. It probably was maybe it was in other spots, but there's people here that are right on top of things when it comes to the environment.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. It was fun.